Thanks so much for attending, everybody. My name is Mark Sneider, and I'm owner-president of RSW US. We have with us today Drew McLellan, who is one of the contributors to this year's Thought Leader Survey. This is our fourth annual survey among thought leaders in the agency industry, and today is the fourth in a series of 6 interviews that we're conducting with the thought leaders that kindly submitted questions for today's for the survey report. So, Drew, thank you so much for attending today. I know you've got a busy schedule. I know you're in Boston right now and traveling all around the country. So, thank you so much. Let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about Drew. Drew has worked in the advertising industry for 25 plus years and started his own agency, McLellan Marketing Group, in 1995 after a 5-year stint at Y&R, and still actively runs the agency. He also owns and runs Agency Management Institute, which can be reached at agencymanagementinstitute.com. And AMI serves over 250 agencies, small to mid-size agencies, advertising, digital, marketing, media, and PR every year, so they can increase their AGI, attract better clients and employees, and scale their business. Drew often appears in publications like Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, New York Times, Washington Post, Agency Post, Ad Age, CNN, Business Week, and many others. The Wall Street Journal calls him one of the 10 bloggers every entrepreneur should read. So, Drew, once again, thank you very much for attending today. Appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, happy to do it.
Great.
To do it. Always happy to talk about agency life.
It is fun, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So why don't we go ahead and dive right into it. Again, appreciate you submitting the questions that you submitted for the survey report. First question, knowing that agencies often have to play a balancing act, managing head count and client count. The first question asked about just sort of if they had some extra cash on hand, what would they do with that cash? How would you recommend agencies think about the activity of hiring more staff, which was the number 2 thing agencies said they do if they do have surplus cash? So how would you recommend agencies sort of balance that? Because that is a tough thing for them to balance, I'm sure.
Well, and it's a tough thing right now because it's a seller's market. There are more jobs out there for agency folks than there are good agency folks to fill those jobs. And a lot of our agencies are also experiencing that even when they have good people on staff, that those people are being poached. A lot more of the corporations and businesses are starting in-house shops. Right. So especially your digitally savvy folks have a big target on their back. And so I think one of the strategies around hiring more people is first to make sure you're taking very good care of the people that you have. Right. So, that consistency is so critical. In fact, one of the surveys that we do every year where we talk to CMOs and business owners about their relationship with agencies, one of the things they hate the most is that AE in and out swapping thing. Right. So, you need to protect that. But in terms of hiring folks, I think it's a couple things. Number one, I think a lot of agency owners wait too long. And so by the time they're ready to hire, they are, if you're breathing, you're a candidate. And so, I always talk to the agency owners about they should be recruiting potential employees like they recruit potential clients. They should always be out looking. And ideally, you would know the next AE or the next writer or the next programmer that if you had a position open, that would be the person you'd want to seek out. Yeah. Odds are they already have a job, and you're going to have to woo them away from that job. But you want to know who you want on your team, so you can be more thoughtful about who you hire.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, and I that's something that we follow, that practice here at RSW. As you know, I'm sure finding great new business directors for agencies is a tough thing to do, and so we're constantly, even our list department and our Marcom department, always out there looking for good talent, even if we don't need it. So it's good to know what's out there.
If you don't need it today, you're going to need it tomorrow.
You probably will, yeah. And this kind of the same question. It was nice to see that agencies want to invest in training for their staff if they do have some extra cash. And if you were in a position to train staff, any priority you might use on who you train first and what to train them on specifically?
Well, we do a lot of training, and one of the things we've seen is an uptick in attendance in our workshops. So I do think agencies are starting to spend some of their extra cash in training, which I agree is good. And I'm not suggesting that our workshop or any workshop is the right choice. There's lots of ways to educate your staff.
Sure.
But I think there's two places. Number one, I think if the most agency owners are accidental business owners. So they started an agency because they got downsized or they got mad and they hung up a shingle, and all of a sudden they have 10 or 20 or 30 employees and they're like, oh shoot, I have to now run a business, right?
Right.
So I think one of the places that business owners need to think about, or agency owners need to think about, is their own education, surrounding themselves with best practices and understanding how the agencies that are delivering at 20 or 25%, net profit, how are they getting there and what do they do that's different? So that's number one. And number two, I'm going to say it's the account service people. They're the ones that hold the relationship with your clients. And, one of the things that we teach is that 70% of an agency's net new revenue should come from existing business. Yep. Well, that doesn't happen without great AEs. Yeah. It doesn't happen with order takers. It doesn't happen with people who aren't, well invested in the client, that they understand how agencies make money and how they contribute to that. So I think that's always a good investment. Yeah. But even starting a book club or a podcast club or anything you can do to teach your people that our industry is changing so fast. If we're not learning something new every day, we're going to be obsolete pretty darn quick.
Yep. Oh, it's great advice. I think that's really smart thing to do, and I would imagine that you probably run into a lot of agency principals that are kind of operating in their own little island and don't spend a lot of time, talking to other agency CEOs or other business people to really sort of get that kind of perspective that they need. So.
Well, that's what the AMI peer groups are all about, is bringing agencies together to talk about that. So absolutely, you're right, because you're not going to talk to the guy or the woman down the street who also owns an agency. You can't be honest with them about what's going on. So you sort of need to step out of your local market to be able to have candid conversations about what it is like to run an agency.
Right. And it shows kind of conversations that are had in groups like yours, AMI, and yep, that's great.
Yeah, plenty of others.
Yep. Okay, cool. So moving on, when we asked agencies what they think they'll be offering clients in the next 12 to 18 months, and I love that question. Any surprises there, and anything that you think an agency must have, or risk being sort of left in the dust? There were a lot of things that were thrown out there, but just curious, given you asked the question, if there were any surprises there.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, I think a lot of agencies don't think about it. They're so busy, caught in the minutia of today, that they don't really lift up their head very often and look out at the trends. Yeah. Some of the trends that we're seeing amongst our agencies are video is back, but it's a very, very different video than, when I started my career. I can remember when I was at Y&R, we didn't touch a video for less than 50 grand. Mm-hmm. And now agencies are doing really nice work for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. So the equipment's changed, the mindset about it has changed, and we've sort of been YouTubed in terms of what's acceptable and what's not. So number one, video's coming back, and it's coming back strong. It's just different. And in alignment with that, one of the big trends we're seeing is augmented reality and virtual reality, mm-hmm. that a lot of agencies are beginning to really recognize that they have to understand how that works and how that would serve a client's business. Sure. So I'm seeing more agencies experimenting with it and launching their first few projects. Right.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering correctly, relative to what I wrote in the report, one of the comments I made was, don't just do AR just for the sake of doing AR. Make sure there's a good business reason and it really has some value, because I'm sure you've seen it and we see it in our surveys among marketers that, one of marketers' complaints about agencies is they're chasing the next shiny object and it really has no meaningful value in moving the client's business ahead. But I think there's definitely, I've seen some applications of AI and AR that can be really positive, and so I think agencies just need to be thinking, like business people, and instead of exclusively like, creative folks.
Well, and I think your point is spot on. I think that our industry had a lot to do with the death of the QR code, right? Because we
Okay.
were just slapping it on everything,
Yeah.
and then you would, what you would see on your phone had no value, and after a while, people were like, "I'm not scanning any of them anymore
Yeah.
because
Right.
you've
Right.
taught me that there's no intrinsic value to it." So,
Yeah.
absolutely, we always have to be thinking about how does it serve the client.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why bother, right?
Yep. Absolutely. And I know I was a bit surprised to see so many agencies so confident in their agency's positioning, believing that it was genuinely different. First question is just any thoughts or comments on those findings?
I think they're wrong. Um, I talk to a lot of agency owners. When I say, "Tell me about your agency," somewhere in the sentence, full service marketing firm, they use the same words. And so
Right.
I think very few agencies have actually figured out how they're different. I think it's hard to do that and look at yourself and figure that out. But I think most of them, I see a lot of RFP responses. I see a lot of that, and I see a lot of how agencies position themselves in our work. And unfortunately, many of them look and sound very much the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see, there's a difference, I think, between an agency trying to bust through to a prospect in an outbound call versus an agency on a 30-minute call or standing face to face with a prospect. I kind of feel like with more time you can build some of that emotional connection in and begin to paint a point of difference that isn't necessarily easy to articulate when you've got 5 seconds to 2 minutes. I'm just as I read through the responses to that question, I was wondering sort of in what context the agencies were thinking about
Yeah.
their positioning and how different it really is. Because I agree with you, it's tough for an agency to really pinpoint what makes them unique, and they also often default to, we're strategic and we're, smart and we're creative.
We want to partner with you. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a slide in a deck that I give about new business mistakes, and one of them is that we sound the same, and we all over this many years of experience, full service, and all
Right.
of that, and it just is sort of like the Charlie Brown wah 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 wah.
Yeah.
I think in the ears of the prospects. I think the agencies that differentiate themselves the best are the ones who are not trying to be everything to everybody.
Right.
But they really understand that they should niche themselves. So it's either in a deliverable, they're an SEO shop, or it is in an industry niche. We are the experts in construction,
Yep.
whatever that may be. I think those are the agencies that actually have something different to talk about.
Yeah. No, I agree, definitely. So, just jumping to your one piece of advice, we asked all of our thought leaders participating in the survey to provide one piece of advice. You started out by saying you don't need 100 new clients, you need 2 to 3 right fit wins every year to grow your agency at 20 to 25% year over year. Maybe you can talk to me a little bit about, you go on to talk about kind of build on that a bit. Talk to me a little bit about that advice and, if for those agencies watching today, how they maybe need to be thinking about their business in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I think we love the hunt. Part of that's part of agency life is we love the new business. We love the affirmation of being chosen, but sometimes we chase after not only the wrong prospect but too many. So for an agency that's been around for a while, they know that if you get $1 million worth of new business, if you get that in 2 clients that are in your sweet spot, that are in your industry, that's a lot more profitable than getting 10 that add up to the million.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times we're not chasing the right size client. We're not really chasing the client, probably because we haven't done the hard work of defining who is it that we can and cannot delight over and over and over again. Okay. And so I think, first of all, it's understanding what your agency does best and what kind of clients, both tangible things and intangible things, that make a great client for you. And then, creating a list and going after those folks, knowing that, look, if I go after 25 or 30 of those people and I'm really at it, and I'm doing it on a regular basis, I'm consistent, which, as you know, most agencies are not, in my new business efforts and in my communication, I will have the opportunity to pitch some of this business every year. And if I can win one or two of them, and when one goes off my prospect list to my client list, I put a new one on the prospect list.
Right.
And I just keep working that list. I'm going to be able to grow my agency 25 to 50% a year if I also take good care of the clients that I have.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I think they shoot way too wide and too far.
Okay. Do you feel like agencies are good in general at sort of qualifying and determining whether or not a client or potential client is right fit? I know one of our other thought leaders was sort of talking about that subject and how his feeling was basically that too often agencies will compromise when they're looking at a prospective client and convince themselves that they're going to be okay even though they may not be.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't think sort of natively we're good at it. So, one of the things that we teach is we teach our agencies how to put together a criteria list of what it is. And then they literally have to, in their leadership team, they have to score any prospect against that list. So let's say there's 10 criteria. If somebody doesn't hit objectively at least 7 of the 10, you have to convince everybody else around the table why you should bother expending the resource. Because that's the other thing I think we don't think about is we underestimate what it costs, both in people and money and time and energy and morale to chase after business and not get it.
Yep. Definitely.
So I think we pay a huge price for chasing after the wrong business.
Yeah. Great. Well, just one last question out of curiosity. You run AMI and then you also have your agency. So I'm curious as to how each informs the other. I would imagine there's some good learnings that come from both sides. Maybe you can just take a minute and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my agency's been around for about 22 years, and my average staff tenure is 16 years. So one of the reasons why I'm able to do that, and I spend about 75 or 80% of my time on the AMI side of the business, and about 25% on the agency. And so the agency sort of ends up being our incubator where we get to test lots of things. Before I talk to agencies about them, we can test them. Or I'll hear something and I'll take it into my own shop and try it so that I can say, well, here's what happened when we did it. So absolutely, they inform each other. And I get smarter on both sides of the fence, which is a beautiful thing for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I really appreciate the time, Drew, and some great insights that I'm sure will be very helpful to the agencies watching today. And once again, Drew McLellan is our guest today for our Thought Leader Survey. Drew's worked in advertising for over 25 years, started his own agency, the McLellan Marketing Group, in '95 after a 5-year stint with Y&R, and still actively runs the agency. He also owns and runs Agency Management Institute, which serves over 250 agencies, small to mid-size, across a range of different types every year, so that they can increase their AGI, attract better clients and employees, and scale their businesses. Drew often appears in publications of lots of types and across business and advertising publications, and one specifically to call out, the Wall Street Journal calls him one of 10 bloggers every entrepreneur should read. And AMI, the website is agencymanagementinstitute.com, so you can find out a little bit more about that. And once again, Drew, really appreciate your time. I know you are a heavy traveler, so taking 15-20 minutes out of your day today to speak to the results that we gathered through the Thought Leader Survey has been extremely of great value, and I'm sure it will be, again, helpful to a lot of the agencies. So thanks so much for making the time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for asking.
All right.